We're going to get started here with our March AQUA-YIELD Farmer Dealer Network webinar. This is Landon Bunderson, Chief Science Officer for AQUA-YIELD. I'm going to be at the helm today. Product compatibility is important, especially for, like I said, avoiding embarrassing moments where you find out something is not compatible. So clues for incompatibility, and I think for most people this is going to be a review, but it's always good to go over these kinds of things. Some clues for incompatibility when you're together a tank mix. Precipitate formation, so that can be, a precipitate is a solid made out of two liquids, basically. So you either have some salt formation on the bottom in the form of a white or other coloration at the kind of settling at the bottom of your tank, or in really bad cases you can get the entire tank mix to turn into a gel, a goopy, horrible gel. Those are precipitates. Another thing you want to look out for is a dramatic color change. If you have ingredients that are blue and yellow and you mix them together and you get a bright red, that is not just a hybrid of the two colors. That suggests that there was a chemical reaction that happened. And so that's another thing to look out for. Heat generation is another thing that you want to be cognizant of, but there are a lot of salts, and I'm sure many of you have noticed if you've ever used like a zinc sulfate or manganese sulfate and dissolved a couple of pounds in a 5-gallon bucket or something just to get things dissolving, you'll notice some heat generation there. Heat generation is not necessarily a bad thing, and it definitely suggests a chemical reaction. It's called an exothermic chemical reaction. It means it's producing heat. The opposite of that is an endothermic chemical reaction, which would actually be a kind of a cooling process. Those are normal with a lot of salts, especially with some common salts that you're using. You'll get heat generation, and that's okay. Odorous gas formation, again, this is similar to the color change. If you're seeing an odor, or if you're smelling an odor that doesn't seem to be a hybrid of the two smells that you put into the tank, or two or more smells that you put into the tank, then that could be a potential for an incompatibility or a clue for that. Most of what you're going to worry about is precipitate formation, and precipitates are usually very apparent. So with compatibility of fertilizers, pH is very important, and specifically with a couple of our products, pH, you're definitely going to want to know the pH of the products you're putting in. So on the left, we have a little table there of our products and their respective pHs. You can see we range from sub 1 pH to up around 10.5 with the Nano K. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. This information is available to everyone, and if you don't have this presentation, I believe it's loaded on the thumb drive that we pass out in the little card, and you can get it online. If you don't have it, reach out to us. We'll definitely make sure and get you this information. Here's some visual examples of precipitates and things that have gone wrong here. Your NanoCal NanoPack had a white precipitate at the bottom, similar with NanoPhos and NanoPack. You're seeing goop. You're seeing things that don't look good. You start to worry about plugging nozzles, and if that's not bad enough, a precipitate lets you know that you've basically locked up that nutrition, and it is not going to be available to the plant. So even if it does make it through your nozzle or your customer's nozzle, spray nozzle or whatever, it's not going to be available nutrition. So here's our compatibility table, and this is mixing things in concentrate. The next table will be more information on how you can get around some of these incompatibilities with some dilution. But you'll notice that NanoPak does not have broad compatibility, and that's partly because of the pH and also because of all of the ingredients in it. One thing that Brittany pointed out as we were talking about this morning, Brittany's our research agronomist. It's a good contact for you to know if you're wanting to set up a trial. She mentioned that, this is basically an advertisement for NanoRise. NanoRise is our additive to fertilizers, and it has broad compatibility. It is not technically compatible in concentrate with NanoPak, but if you look at our next slide here, when you dilute them, if you'll dilute NanoRise first or NanoPak first in the tank, you'll find that they are compatible, and a lot of the compatibility issues are going to go away if you're diluting one or the other first before you mix them together. So, we're talking about at least 15 or so gallons to the acre in a tank mix dilution. So you're thinking about the rates. Our products are 4 ounces to the acre. One important note is NanoZinc is not going to be compatible with any products with a pH above 7. So if I go back to this compatibility slide, you're going to see NanoK, which is our highest pH product here, can be up to 10.5. It's not going to be compatible with NanoK, which is a potassium acetate, and other potassium acetates, unless they have some kind of special additive in there, are going to fall into that same category. And it's easy to check the pH on the SDS sheet of your fertilizer or other products to kind of get a feel for where the pH is going to fall and kind of avoid some pitfalls there. I put this Michigan State University tank mix instruction thing up here just because I was hoping that Michigan State was going to lose today. They pulled it out against Bradley, which I think Bradley is just one person. I think it was the entire Michigan State team against a guy named Bradley, and he almost beat them. So, yeah, just beating up Michigan State a little bit there. No, we have instructions on jar testing that we can give you. It's easy to do an quick internet search and find some instructions on jar testing, but essentially you're mixing two products that have questionable compatibility in a jar. I mean, it's basically that simple. If you have questions, if for example you're going to be using NanoZinc with a product that has a pH that's approaching that red line, a quick jar test and waiting 24 hours is a good idea, just to get a feel for what the compatibility is. So I told you that would be short and sweet. We're going to move over to NanoPhos now as our product highlight. NanoPhos is one of my favorites, and I think that with some of the trials that we have going with universities and other groups this year on NanoPhos, that the attention around NanoPhos will continue to grow. As most of you know, phosphorus and nitrogen are some of our biggest water pollutants in agricultural areas. Nitrogen is typically going to leach through the soil, so it's going to move down through the soil profile as water pushes it through. And phosphorus, because it is so prone to binding to soil particles, is going to be typically a risk for runoff. So anytime you have water sheeting off of fields and you've just applied some phosphorus, or you have some leftover phosphorus in the soil, which you are always going to have, that's at risk for moving into a water system. And when you get nitrogen and phosphorus rich soils, you're going to create an environment that is advantageous for those little single and multi-celled organisms, algae, that are going to gobble all of that up. When the algae gobbles all that up, they're respirating, they're using the oxygen. You pull the oxygen out of the water, and then fish start to die, and people start to get mad, and they can produce toxins. So NanoPhos, in terms of phosphorus, is what we consider the most efficient phosphorus product on the market. It is applied at 4 ounces of the acre, and it can make other phosphorus products better. It's typically not a standalone 4 ounces of the acre all by itself product, but it can be used in certain circumstances as that kind of a product. In dramatic cases, we've seen dramatic reductions, and one of the trials that we set up with a timber company was meant to be 7.5 gallons to the acre of 1034O plus 4 ounces of NanoPhos, and that was going to be compared against 7.5 gallons of it per acre of 1034O without the NanoPhos. Well, the operator got confused and applied 4 ounces of the acre in one plot and 7.5 gallons per acre of 1034O in the other plot. And when they started looking at the results, they noticed that the NanoPhos, the treatment that got the NanoPhos was greener. It had more needles. It was taller. It had new sprouts, and it was thriving. They pulled tissue samples. There were the tissue concentrations in that little sapling, seedling loblolly pine was higher in the NanoPhos treated plant. This is an extreme case, but it's not surprising that this happened. In a lot of acreage that is planted in many parts of the US and Canada, you find that the phosphorus levels are quite high. Plants are actually quite good at obtaining phosphorus if they have big, healthy roots. The problem is when you're starting out, when you're transplanting a little loblolly pine, for example, you've got a little seedling that has very small roots. The roots have more or less been disturbed as you're planting it, and it's just not very happy. So what it needs is a quick dose of highly available phosphorus to kind of kickstart those roots. Once those roots get moving and begin to mine the phosphorus in the soil, then you're basically banking on what is in the soil. So if you were to look at a soil test and start looking at making recommendations for NanoPhos, if you saw that the soil phosphorus was low and available phosphorus was low, then you would definitely not recommend 4 ounces of the acre. And we don't, it would be an extreme event where we would recommend 4 ounces of the acre NanoPhos without any additive. But we weren't surprised when we looked at these results. We saw the soil tests. We were familiar with the system that they were working with, and they were extremely excited, understandably so. Lugging around a couple of jugs is a lot better than lugging around a couple of totes. Another instance, and many of you have heard about this, the reduction of phosphorus inputs from 15 gallons to 5 gallons on melons in the Southwest in southern Arizona. What you find is a lot of phosphorus in the soil, but most of it's not very available, and that means it's not soluble. So if it's not soluble, the root has to grow into it and intercept it. With the nanoparticle, where the phosphorus is trapped inside the nanoparticle, that phosphorus is moving with the water, which is kind of a neat feature of the nanoparticle in the soil. I just wanted to show this. I believe this is from Purdue University, that you see these graphs all the time, and they're basically copying each other. You can see highest phosphorus availability is from about 6.2 to about 7.1, and really 6.7, and this is going to depend a little bit on soil type, but 6.7 is right there in the Goldilocks zone. If you're outside of that pH, you can see way down on the pH scale, if you have pH between 3 and 4, you have very high fixation. Especially if you have iron in the soil, you're going to have that phosphorus and iron binding and precipitating like we talked about. It is going to render that phosphorus highly unavailable. On the other end of the spectrum, you have calcium, and right there, smack dab in the middle, just left of the middle, is aluminum. Most soils have iron, aluminum, and calcium in them. And so really the point of this graph is that phosphorus is not often very available. And that's why many growers have moved to low-dose liquid applications, if they can, through drip or through foliar. And this is on weekly or monthly, depending on what they can afford, doses. And that's because phosphorus doesn't remain available very long. It's being tied up by these other nutrients and other ions in the soil. So the cool thing about NanoPhos, 4 ounces the acre, add it to your phosphorus products, your liquid phosphorus products, and you're going to have a really quick, highly available dose of phosphorus that's going to get especially seedlings really moving. This can be applied on the soil or foliarly, and it's a great product. So I told you I would keep it short and sweet, and that is the end of our AQUA-YIELD Farmer Dealer Network webinar for March.